Hey guys. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Had a Dog Companion. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 10 My Heart. Naruto stumbled home. Already his body felt hot and his tongue thick with parchness. He was going to his apartment, and straight to bed. He had a feeling that tonight was going to be really bad. Naruto put his hand to his head, trying to cool off his hot forehead. It didn't work. Naruto let out a small groan as he ascended the last set of stairs and turned onto his hallway. He halted in his tracks. A man of rather large bulk stood in front of his door. One of the bodyguards for Satoshi. He was in the middle of the hall knocking on his door. Naruto let out another groan. That could only mean one thing. At the sound the man turned, greasy long blonde hair falling into his face with the motion, and frowned. The small amount of whiskers and flabby cheeks on the 25-year-old seemed to migrate several inches south with the frown, and light green eyes narrowed accordingly. His name, as Naruto learned the first night of work, was Griswold. He'd laughed hard at that, right before getting a black eye. Naruto unconsciously forced himself to walk straighter without relying on the handrail like he'd been doing moments before. He took deep, even breaths and stuffed his hands into his jacket in an attempt to hide how weak he felt at the moment. Naruto, several of the waiters didn't show up tonight. No notice. Not at home. Nothing. I know you're sick, but Satoshi needs you tonight, offered double pay even, Griswold said in a surprisingly light voice. Naruto nodded grimly. Just give me a minute, Naruto said quietly. While getting ready, Naruto made sure to hide a pair of kunai on each leg. He could use kunai like an extension of himself with little to no effort after all the practice he'd been doing the last few months. If he was in a tight spot tonight, and couldn't rely on his body, then he'd be able to defend with his kunai at least. Ibiki and Anko, the head of torture and interrogation and his eccentric second in command, went to the same bar, every Monday night. The Sober's Tomb bar was in one of the darker areas of Konoha, but they served the strongest alcoholic beverages around. The two walked in, their presence immediately garnering the looks of many, eyes wearily following them to their table. The eyes of the purple-haired snake woman immediately fell upon something that took up her interest. She grinned and nodded her head in the direction of a certain individual. Ibiki humored her and peered behind him. A slight twitch of the lips was the only sign of reaction when the man spotted the boy. The small boy, around 11 maybe 12, walked around the bar taking orders and bringing drinks. He hid his hair under a black bandana and hid his face with black bandages. Draped all in black, his most distinguishing feature was a pair of icy blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. Anko would kill to see what the rest of his face looked like. It was rare that they saw the boy as a waiter. He normally hid in the back, fulfilling other duties. But despite the rarity of it, the boy was their favorite server. His sweet nature yet sarcastic attitude left both special jounins with smiles on their faces by the end of the night. The boy seemed to be moving slower today though as he migrated to their direction, taking orders and requests all the while. When he finally got around to their table, Anko gave the boy a shit-eating smile. Still working this crap shoot of a job? Anko asked. The boy snorted. Still showing as much as possible within the legal limits? The boy asked hoarsely, pointing his pen at Anko's mesh shirt, the usual greeting. Anko frowned. You sound like shit, kid, Anko commented. The boy shrugged. A lot of workers didn't come in tonight, so I had no choice, the boy replied hoarsely. So what can I get you? Anko and Ibiki shared a glance. I'll have a mudslide, with cream no milk, over ice not blended, Anko said happily. The boy nodded, jotting it down and looking expectantly at Ibiki. Cinnamon vodka, no ice, the man answered. The boy moved slowly toward the bar, movement stiff. They both watched silently. Too many damn orphans in this village and nowhere to go, Anko commented idly. Ibiki agreed. They'd been there for nearly an hour, downing their drinks and making conversation with each other and their server, when a fight broke out in the middle of the bar. Anko leaned to the side to see better, eagerly anticipating some good blood being spilt, until she saw the boy. The young server was unfortunately near enough to get shoved into a table, the 3 glasses on his platter crashing to the floor and breaking. The young server swayed a bit before steadying himself, and walked over to the 2 men quite calmly. One of the men swung at him, but the boy simply sidestepped him, and chopped him in the back of the neck, knocking him out instantly. 2 of the bar's bodyguards came rushing out even as the boy moved to the second man, who was angrily screaming at the unconscious one. The drunken man tried to grab a hold of the boy when he came near, but the boy easily ducked and gave a strong right hook into the soft belly of the man. The man vomited as he fell to the floor, hands reaching out for anything to slow his descent. His hands found only the back of a black shirt and a small black piece of bandage to grip before losing consciousness and slamming onto the cold tiled floor. The boy managed to rip his shirt from the man before he was brought down with him, but his black bandages came slightly undone. Not enough to show anything but loose enough that they could easily come completely off at any time. A few of the more exuberant drunks clapped and laughed as the bodyguards collected the 2 men and tossed them out onto the streets, hollering and billowing their amusement. Enko normally would have joined in, except her eyes were worriedly watching the boy who stood to the side, leaning heavily against the booth, and holding his forehead and shaking hands. I had a feeling the kid had shinobi skills, Ibiki said softly, taking a shot of vodka. Yeah, I'm gonna check and see if he's alright. He looks like he's about to puke himself, Enko said as she stood up. Ibiki watched her, a small smirk on his lips. Tough, Enko may be, but for certain people who managed to get under her skin they'd find quite the softy. As she got closer to the boy she noticed that his black bandages were much looser than she'd ever seen them. When she stood in front of him and the boy still didn't seem aware of her presence, Enko gently touched his shoulders. The boy's head shot up, pulled away from her quickly, but the motion obviously didn't agree with him since he nearly fell to the ground. Enko reached out and steadied him before that could happen though, eyes meeting with a pair of slightly glazed over ones. I think you should sit down for a few minutes, Enko said, her usual boisterous voice tempered for the moment. The boy slowly nodded in agreement, recognizing the voice of the snake women. Enko guided the boy to the nearest booth and sat him down, looking around for a glass of something not alcoholic. Here, a familiar voice said. Enko looked behind her to find Ibiki offering her his water canister. She smiled and tugged the water out of his scarred hands. Hey kid, can you swallow this? Enko asked gently. The boy looked wearily at her and the canister, shaking like a leaf from fatigue, but nodded and pulled down a bandage enough to pour some water through cracked, pale lips. He harshly coughed a few times, but the shaking wasn't as bad. Enko smiled in relief. Thanks, the boy croaked out. The bandages were quite loose now, enough to see a black line across a cheek. Enko lifted her hand up to the small area of forehead not covered by the bandana and hissed in shock when her fingers met burning skin. Kid, you've got a high fever, Enko said. The boy nodded, trying to smile, but failed miserably when a look of intense pain flitted across his eyes. Gotta finish my shift, the boy said with a shrug. Enko frowned, peering behind her back at Ibiki who had a similar expression on his face. The young server leaned forward, placing his head on his knees, and breathing unsteadily. That doesn't look like it's going to be happening tonight, young man, Ibiki said quietly. The boy took several long deep breaths before pushing himself to his feet. He almost stumbled for a moment, but seemed to pull himself together in midair, standing tall and steady. Thank you, but I can handle myself. I'll clean up the mess and then bring you refills on your drinks, the young server said hoarsely. Enko looked as if she was going to push the issue, but Ibiki pulled her along toward their table gently. It's his decision. We shouldn't disrespect it, Ibiki said sternly. Enko nodded hesitantly, returning to her seat. Neither of them knew anything about the boy's home life, or even his name for that matter. If the boy felt he needed to finish his work, they would not be foolish enough to question that judgment. Conversation died as they watched the boy struggle to clean up the broken glasses and vomit from the floor. Enko fingered her empty glass, cheeks slightly tinted pink by the liquor. I heard you got a hold of a couple people yesterday, Enko said, trying to start the conversation back up. Some people Lady Hokage was angry at. Ibiki nodded. Seems that our lady's more protective over Uzumaki than even the third Hokage. She was furious to find some men dump trash on the Jinchuriki when he was passing through after a meeting with her. Can't say that I blame her, but she'll not be happy to find out what the people of Konoha have gotten away with doing to that kid, Ibiki said solemnly, taking a shot of vodka. That's for damn sure. Hope all those bastards get what they deserve. I've heard some nasty shit from people about that kid, Enko said, rather depressed at the thought of it. Kid's got one hell of a strong will, that's for sure, to be smiling like an idiot, despite everything he's been through. Ibiki chuckled. In that respect he sort of reminds me of you, the man said. Enko snorted. You know that most of that crap I pull is for show. Most of the time it's just to get through the day. It's easier for me if they hate the crazy snake women instead of me. I can pretend it's somebody else they hate. If they don't know me, then they can't hate me, right? Enko asked tiredly. Ibiki nodded in agreement. Exactly, I personally believe that Uzumaki is as human as the rest of us. Even those who think he's not a demon look at him as if there isn't even the slightest possibility that he could be feeling sad or depressed. It's disturbing more than anything else that no one even thinks to doubt that the smiling idiot could be anything but what he shows, Ibiki said, leaning back in his seat. For a village filled with shinobi of supposed great intelligence, there really isn't that many that the kid hasn't fooled. Enko sat there stunned. She had not thought about it that way before. The young server came back, cleaned off of all the stuff he'd inadvertently gotten on himself while picking up, with refills in hand. I'm sorry it took so long, but we're short-handed tonight, the boy said mechanically as he set down the drinks, voice even hoarser than before and apparently unaware that he'd already mentioned the fact the first time around. Enko smiled indulgently at the fever-ridden kid. That's fine, Enko said. Is there anything else I can get you? The boy asked. Enko shook her head, but to her surprise Ibiki cleared his throat. Actually, I'd like to order a meal. The steak dinner? Ibiki said politely. The boy stared at him a moment, slowly pulling out his pad of paper and messily wrote the order down, barely comprehensible due to the kids shaking hands. Enko stared at him questioningly. They never ate dinner at the bar because, well, the food tasted like crap. When the boy left, Enko voiced her question out loud and Ibiki just shrugged. Call it guilt if you will, but I'd like to make sure the kid gets back to his place safely, and the boy's got another hour before he gets off. Enko grinned with a glint in her dark brown eyes. You're going soft, sir, the young woman declared. Just in certain areas, the man replied. The night only got rougher for the young server. The fever seemed to worsen, and the boy made a lot of mistakes through the night, earning himself some vile threats from the drunk and a dark glare from his boss behind the bar. When the boss came out from behind the bar around 11 and told the boy that he could go home, the utter relief on the boy's face spoke volumes. Enko and Ibiki, having already paid for their meal, made toward the exit and waited outside for the boy. When the boy pulled himself through the doorway and started to walk down the street, Enko called out to him. The boy spun, startled, and almost collapsed from the movement. Barely keeping his footing, his left hand immediately flew to his head, as if trying to hold it in place while his right hand lowered further toward his leg. Enko walked up to him. The boy caught sight of her and jumped away, flipping in the air and landing on a high stack of crates. Right hand immediately reaching for something attached to his inner calf of his leg. Enko raised a brow at him, impressed despite herself. She wasn't so sure she could flip like that when she was that nauseous. Relax, kid. It's Enko, remember? We just want to make sure you get home safely, Enko called out. The boy looked at her, obviously dizzy from his little escape jump as he wavered from side to side. Forgive me if I don't trust the customers, the boy said unsteadily. Enko nodded. On any other day I'd say that's completely true, but you can barely walk, kid, Enko pointed out. The boy would have protested, but at that moment his dizziness won out, and he found himself tumbling to the ground below. Enko moved in fast, catching the boy in her arms and supporting him as she helped him stand. The boy leaned heavily against her, covering his mouth with his hand. Thanks. Don't have a choice, do I? The boy asked hoarsely. Enko shook her head. Not much of one, kid, Enko replied teasingly. Ibiki felt his lips twitch, but only a twitch. As they walked down the streets, Enko noticed that the further they got, the more heavily the boy fell on her support. Perhaps it would be better to take him to the hospital instead at this point. The boy pointed them in the correct direction, his words getting more strained and slurred for each step taken. Ugh! Anko turned to the boy at the sound and was surprised to find herself being pushed away. The boy fell awkwardly on his knees, ripped down his bandages and proceeded to vomit across the road. Ibiki moved quickly beside the boy, gently holding his shoulders in case he collapsed further. "Thanks for not puking on me, kid, I appreciate it," Anko said as she moved toward him. The boy started to chuckle a bit until more vomit filled his throat, and he was puking once more. Once everything was out of his system, the boy wiped his mouth and shakily got to his feet with Ibiki's help. In his fevered state, the boy forgot something though, to retighten the bandages. "You," Anko breathed in shock. The boy panicked, ripping himself away from a startled Ibiki. He tried to run, but his aching body was attacked by an immense pain. He fell to the ground holding his chest and barely repressing a scream. Anko moved to his side, gently pulling him up and supporting him with her strength. Ibiki caught up and saw the boy's face as well. Whisker marks spread across the red, fever-ridden cheeks of the young server, telling all far and wide that the person who bore them was a Jinchuriki. "It's okay, Naruto, we're not gonna hurt ya, kid," Anko told him quietly. Anko met Ibiki's eyes, giving the man a silent signal. The man nodded and disappeared to get a medic. Shizen felt an immense headache coming on. She gently massaged her temple with soft, slightly delicate fingers as the doctor across from her argued with an ANBU beside her, who refused to get the necessary shot. The tall masked figure was not pleased at all, his once bloody leg bandaged up and healed. A nin dog of an enemy shinobi from the village hidden in the rocks had bitten him during a battle, and as was the custom treatment for such an injury, the man needed a rabies shot that just happened to require being taken in the ass. The ANBU was most definitely not pleased. Shizen looked up when a large man entered the room and motioned for her to come over quickly. Shizen silently thanked whoever was watching over her, and excused herself to speak with Ibiki. "I need your help with a sick genin, Shizen-san," Ibiki said seriously. Shizen nodded and immediately followed the man as he hurriedly made his way out of the hospital. "Why didn't you bring him directly to hospital, and why choose me? There are many qualified medical nin for some sick genin," Shizen asked as they leaped onto the roofs. "Anko and I considered it, but when we found out who it was, we knew we couldn't do that," Ibiki answered simply. Shizen raised her brow in question. "When they found out who he was? They hadn't known beforehand? Who could it be that couldn't just have any medic?" "What do you mean by that?" Shizen asked. Ibiki sighed as he dodged a pole and leaped over a rather large roof wall. "The genin is Naruto Uzumaki," Ibiki answered. Shizen stared at him for a moment, startled. "Naruto's sick?" Shizen whispered, unconsciously picking up her pace. "Very sick," Ibiki answered once more. Shizen bit her lip, thinking about the argument Naruto had with Tsunade and the searching the two of them had been doing. It appeared they had their just cause for wanting to take him to the hospital. Her mind stopped on her and rewound a bit. Ibiki had said something that still seemed off. "Even if the person is Naruto, why didn't you bring him to the hospital?" Shizen asked. Ibiki stayed silent, and for a moment Shizen thought he was going to ignore her. "The third brought a Konoha doctor to my interrogation room once," the scarred man said slowly, for purposely forgetting to give a child numbing medicine before an operation of a damaged heart. Shizen couldn't help it. She leaped to the ground and puked on the side of the road. Ibiki gracefully landed beside her, pulling her hair back and out of her face as she continued to empty her stomach. Shizen shook uncontrollably in horror. "Oh God! Oh my God!" she whispered as she took a cloth out of her pocket and wiped her mouth. The gas used to knock a patient out during an operation was replaced with a temporary paralysis gas so that the child couldn't move or scream, Ibiki continued. Shizen bent over again, and the last of her dinner paid her a visit. The damaged heart developed due to a combination of malnutrition and abuse of the child. All the abusers were taken care of personally by the third. The damage was extensive enough that even the boy's healing abilities could not fully fix it. If I remember correctly, he was about 7, maybe 8, when he had the operation done. Naruto has recovered enough from the incident to go inside a hospital to visit a friend, but not enough to be admitted to one under any circumstance, Ibiki finished quietly. "Oh God," was all Shizen could say. "We need to hurry. I don't know how serious Naruto's illness is," Ibiki reminded her, though not unkindly. Shizen nodded, and soon both rose to the roof times and across the village. When the two landed in front of the apartment complex of Naruto's building, they took the stairs two at a time. Ibiki had left them in the streets but knew Naruto was coherent enough to have directed Anko to his home. One more reason for Ibiki choosing the women besides the obvious was that she knew where Naruto lived. The first thing they heard when opening the door was the sound of an agonized scream. Shizen rushed through the living room/kitchen and pushed aside the curtain makeshift door to see Anko holding Naruto's hand. The bandana, bandages, and shirt had been stripped away and a cold, wet cloth placed on his forehead. His entire body dripped with feverish sweat, and his face was contorted in pain as he squeezed Anko's hand. Shizen could also clearly see that the blonde was having difficulty breathing as his chest rose and sank fast but with obvious strain. Naruto's eyes were tightly closed, his left hand clenching the bed sheets underneath him. Much to Shizen's growing horror, she could count Naruto's ribs and see the gentle bumps where she knew organs lay under muscle. She and Lady Tsunade had believed that Naruto had been sick for a few weeks from what Hana Inuzuka had reported from Guruko. After talking to Naruto himself and finding that it had been going on long enough for the third Hokage to know, they'd assumed that it was an illness that came up every once in a while but that wasn't dangerous. So while they had been keen to find out what it was and how they could help, they took a leisurely attitude towards it and not pushed Naruto too hard for answers. Now with what Ibiki had just told her, and what she saw before herself, she had another theory. The third didn't know about the problem as Naruto claimed, but she'd be willing to bet anything that Naruto hid the side effects of that problem from Sarutobi at all costs. She understood now why Naruto would hide it from Tsunade. She'd spent a lot of time with Naruto these last couple months. She had been delighted in his interests of making medicine from herbs, entertained by his surprisingly intelligent conversations and humorous stories, enraged by the treatment she saw him receive when people believed he was by himself, surprised by his eagerness to learn, confused by the relationship he held with his team because at times they seemed close and during others it seemed as if they didn't know each other at all, and humbled in how far Naruto would go to make the people around him happy. Sure, Naruto could be loud, sometimes he could make stupid comments, and maybe he needed a little extra time to understand things, but she didn't understand how the people around him could condemn him so easily for such small things. How they could hit him for it or insult him or act like they were 10 times better than him when they, themselves, held far more detrimental faults. They claimed he was annoying, but Shizen could hardly see how. Most of Naruto's wayward comments were in fact very true. When he comes into the office and speaks with Tsunade, it isn't as Hokage and Genin, but as older sister and younger brother. He shouldn't be hit for calling her Bachan or commenting on her drinking or calling Tsunade on her own rude remarks. To be absolutely honest, it annoyed her to no end to see Sakura hit the boy or Sasuke insult him. His own sensei joined in sometimes, telling the blonde that he was in the wrong in something or another. If Jiraiya didn't already hold the claim of having him as an apprentice, she would have asked for him weeks ago. While Naruto could not learn any type of medical ninjutsu due to being a Jinchuriki, the boy showed great skill in being able to make medicine and evaluate the status of a patient. Naruto was even good at treating small wounds that didn't need to be treated with chakra. She could further those skills and teach him a few of her own non-medical jutsu. When Shizen heard that Sakura, the boy's teammate of all people, was to be Tsunade's apprentice, she'd broken the pencil in her hand. If only Naruto hadn't made her promise not to tell anyone. Teams in Konoha were kept balanced for the best results. If one team member chose Genjutsu as their main specialty, the other two were highly encouraged to specialize in something else. Team Guy, for example, Niji focused on chakra control and inner damage to the body, Lee focused on strength and outer damage to the body, Tenten focused on weaponry for long distance to cover her two teammates' greatest weakness. They balanced out to create the perfect combat specialist squad. Only a medical squad sent to assist an injured team needed more than one medic. She would bet every last dime she had that Naruto said nothing about the fact that he was already certified. If Sakura wanted to be a medic, he would pretend that his certification didn't exist, and as long as Shizen didn't say anything about it, no one would be the wiser. Shizen's hands glowed green as she moved to the side of the bed, kneeling down and placing her cold hands on Naruto's chest as he let out another agonized scream. Shizen's eyes widened. Naruto's own chakra was unwillingly attacking his insides. The chakra was leaking out of Naruto's chakra coils and dangerously wrapping itself around the 13-year-old's organs. The chakra wasn't moving inside the organs or wrapping around enough to squeeze them, but their mere presence outside the coils and around the organs was burning them slightly while simultaneously straining the rest of Naruto's body. It wasn't lethal in and of itself, but it caused the fever, vomiting, and a horrifying amount of pain. Shizen searched, but no matter how long she sat there, she couldn't find the source of what was causing it. There was one other problem, though. Naruto screamed in agony again, gripping the place over his heart tightly, tears of pain sliding through closed eyelids. If she hadn't been looking for it, she never would have found it. Within one of the chambers of Naruto's heart, she found damage. The damage in his heart was reacting harshly to the strain on Naruto's body, causing an already painful illness to be nearly tripled in pain. Shizen felt tears slide down her face. How long had Naruto been in this condition? Slowly, with her years of experience, Shizen coaxed Naruto's chakra back into the coils. Then she softly moved her healing chakra around the organs, repairing any small intense burns she found. It was a temporary fix at best, since she didn't know the cause for the condition and thus couldn't stop the chakra from leaving again. Naruto's heart was another matter. He would need an open surgery in order to get a combination of medical jutsu and seal healing to take effect that far into his chest. She didn't even want to think about how she was going to get Naruto to go along with it after what Ibiki told her. Shizen allowed her chakra to fade. Beneath her hands she could feel Naruto shaking. Naruto already seemed to be doing better, his breathing had finally evened out, and while still suffering from a fever, it was slowly ebbing. Shizen guessed it would be another hour before it lowered to something safe. The best part was that Naruto was no longer screaming in pain, which meant his heart had also reacted to fixing the chakra problem. Is he gonna be alright? Shizen jumped as she remembered for the first time since entering the room that there were two others beside herself. Shizen brushed back a wet blonde lock from Naruto's sleeping face and gave the boy a tender smile. I think he'll be okay, but there are still too many unanswered questions to be certain, Shizen told Anko, who had been the one to ask. The snake woman still held onto Naruto's hand as she nodded in understanding. I'm going to stay with him through the night, and tomorrow I'll talk to Tsunade about what we should do about this, Shizen told the others. Ibiki nodded in understanding while Anko looked hesitant to leave. Shizen gave her a tired but genuine smile. I promise, nothing will happen to him while I'm watching, Shizen assured. The other woman nodded before standing up and leaving with her partner. Some time after Ibiki and Anko left, early in the morning of the next day, Shizen sat next to the bed nursing a cup of tea in her hands. Naruto lay unmoving on the bed, the only sign of life was the steady rise and fall of his chest. Shizen's mind tumbled with thoughts. She reached out a hand and brushed away straw-colored strands of hair to feel his forehead. It was a little warm, a very low fever, much better than the burning high fever of last night. Naruto's eyes scrunched up and the boy turned his head in reaction to the touch, but his form stayed asleep. Naruto would never willingly enter a hospital for himself. It was understandable given what happened. Shizen shuddered as Ibiki's words came back to her. The third brought a Konoha doctor to my interrogation room once, for purposely forgetting to give a child numbing medicine before an operation of a damaged heart. The gas used to knock a patient out during an operation was replaced with a temporary paralysis gas so that the child couldn't move or scream. She couldn't even begin to imagine the pain and terror that experience brought, and Naruto had only been 7 years old, for God's sake. It surprised her immensely, now that she knew that Naruto had been able to visit his teammate in the hospital with such calmness. It surprised her even more that Naruto had an interest and talent for making medicine. Life truly could not be so accidentally ironic. There had to be someone up there laughing their asses off at them all. It made her think, though. Did that mean that the problem with Naruto's heart had been left unattended to for the past 6 years? Had Naruto not gone to the hospital for anything since the incident? Naruto coughed and moaned in his sleep, turning on his side and unconsciously dragging the blanket further over himself. Shizen took another sip of her swiftly cooling tea and noted with growing irritability the coldness of the room. The apartment was not in any way a good place for someone who was sick. It wouldn't be a good idea to put Naruto in the hospital if the problem was with his heart, though. The heart would react badly to any stress put on it, and now that Shizen knew about the incident, she would make sure that she and Lady Tsunade were able to take care of him without placing him in a hospital. She couldn't bear the thought of forcing Naruto to stay in a place that was a nightmare for him. The heart. Oh, Shizen said and thought in surprise. The heart was a major conductor of chakra and by extension the center of chakra control. If the heart was damaged in any way, then chakra control would be thrown completely out of whack. Jinchuriki always held a great deal of difficulty when it came to chakra control due to the sheer amount of chakra they possess, but Shizen had always thought that Naruto's control was much worse than it should be. She knew the boy practiced an insane amount of hours on it without getting any results. Hell, practically everyone knew. Many of the rookies found great pleasure in teasing the Jinchuriki about how lousy his control was and frequently blamed it on Naruto's supposed stupidity. Naruto turned over again, and his eyes cracked open just enough to see a slimmer of blue. Dull eyes laced with illness stared at her for a long moment, trying desperately to recognize who sat in front of him, body tense. Shizen set her teacup down and took the washcloth from the water-filled bowl she'd prepared and stroked Naruto's face with it. "How are you feeling, Naruto-kun?" Shizen asked sweetly. Naruto's body visibly relaxed at the sound of the woman's voice. "Shizen?" Naruto asked hoarsely, voice cracking painfully at the end. "Sure. You shouldn't talk, Naruto-kun, you've been very sick." "I'll be right back," Shizen said sternly, standing up. Shizen went and got some tea, grumbling to herself at the terrifying lack of food in the house. Some honey would have greatly helped the genin's throat right about now. When she entered through the curtain/door, it was to see Naruto struggling to sit up in the bed. Shizen frowned, setting the teacup down on the bedside dresser, and hurriedly went to help him. Her hands went to his back, wincing as she felt the protruding spine, and carefully pulled him into a sitting position. From the last time she saw him lying on the hotel bed, he'd lost at least 10 pounds, and on an already small frame like Naruto's it was extremely dangerous. Why hadn't anyone noticed how sick Naruto was before this? Surely his teammates saw something? Naruto nodded his thanks to her, his hand holding the now warm, wet cloth to his forehead. "You should have waited for me to help you," Shizen said sternly as she reached for the tea. "Drink," Shizen commanded, placing the cup near the blonde's lips. Naruto grimaced, but tiredly nodded and let the cloth in his hand fall to the bed. His hand shakily went up to the cup and half held it with Shizen's steady hand while he sipped at it. When half the cup was done and Naruto couldn't stomach any more, Shizen set it down again. "I really wish you would have told me, Naruto-kun," Shizen said gently. Naruto slowly shook his head, pulling his body back till it touched the backboard of his bed. His body sagging against it, and welcoming the solid support. "I'm fine." "Is Nahen," Naruto mumbled hoarsely. Shizen felt hurt by that. Even now, when there was no way he could hide it, Naruto still tried to lie. "I've been here all night, Naruto. I did a diagnosis ninjutsu on you to determine what was wrong," Shizen said quietly. Naruto's eyes flew wide open, blue eyes staring at her in petrified horror. His entire body tensed in terror. Shizen flinched. She hadn't anticipated his reaction being this bad. "I know about the problem with your heart," Shizen continued. Something strange happened then. Naruto's body remained tense, but there was a marginal relaxation to it, as if he'd been expected her to say something else. "My heart?" Naruto asked quietly, hand touching the surface over the organ. "Gigi said it was fixed despite what someone did," Naruto whispered hoarsely, not meeting her eyes. Shizen flinched. If Naruto believed that the problem wasn't his heart, then it was possible the third Hokage had not been aware of the problem either. She and Lady Tsunade were the most skilled of medics in Konoha, so it was very possible for the mediocre medics at the hospital to have missed the damage. That led to another thought, though. The fact that Naruto's chakra was attacking him and causing him to be ill. The way Naruto reacted. Naruto must know what was causing it. To not tell anyone about it like that. Naruto must really not want to be placed in a hospital. I found damage in one of the 4 chambers of your heart, as well as the fact that something is causing your chakra to make you sick. Do you know what's causing your chakra to act like that? Shizen asked. Naruto still wouldn't look at her. He shook his head, bringing his legs up to his chest and wrapping his arms around his knees. Shizen sat all the way on the bed, so that she was directly across from him. He knew. She had this painful gut feeling that he knew what it was. I think you know exactly what's causing you to be sick. I know about what that doctor did to you, Naruto, but I need you to trust me and to tell me what's wrong. There's a place in the Hokage Tower, created for emergencies, that I can take you to. You don't have to go to the hospital, I promise, Shizen said pleadingly. Naruto looked up at her wearily, distrust clear in his still dull blue eyes. You're not gonna take me to the hospital? Naruto asked hoarsely. Shizen had to lean in to hear him, but when she did, she smiled encouragingly and nodded. The emergency room is fully equipped to handle anything, Shizen stated matter-of-factly. Naruto buried his head into his knees, clearly trying to think through the situation. Shizen allowed him to do so, going into the kitchen to refill her cup of tea. The more of the apartment she saw, the more irritated she became. Besides the plants, it was incredibly bare. The refrigerator was broken, the shower only supplied cold water. For some unknown reason, the bedroom door was missing and the heater appeared to be in disrepair. If she had anything to say about it, Naruto would be out of this place as soon as possible. When Shizen finished pouring the tea, she re-entered the tiny bedroom to find Naruto fast asleep on his side, back against the blackboard and legs tucked in close. His entire form screamed exhaustion. Shizen's eyes softened when they saw him, hardly deterred that she hadn't gotten an answer from him. Shizen peered at the clock. It was just past 4 in the morning. After last night, Naruto would probably sleep most of the day. Chapter 11: Discovering how Naruto copes. To say that Naruto was scared was an understatement. Naruto was petrified with terror beyond belief. Shizen had been right when she thought Naruto was terrified to be placed in the hospital. The mere thought brought up horrible nightmares for him. However, Naruto was mentally strong enough to go to the hospital if he really needed to, as long as he had someone he knew with him. Being surrounded by Tsunade and Shizen, as well as Sakura, gave him the courage to be there for his injured teammates. Shikamaru being there when he woke up after meeting Gamabunta staved off a panic attack. He would admit to himself that it had been difficult to stand in the white room with images of blood and knives running through his mind. It was not, in fact, what stopped him from going to the hospital for his illness, though. If it was solely the illness, then Naruto would have gone to Tsunade and asked quietly for help months ago. He would have asked Irika to be with him, and Naruto believed that he would be fine with those two there. No, what stopped him from going to the hospital was a completely different matter. He had thought it was all over the moment Shizen said she'd done a diagnosis on him, but somehow, someway, she had not found out about the other damage. Kyubi told him once that his healing abilities could not reach the areas that the seal touched or his heart because the heart was the center of Naruto's soul. He had lied to Guruko when he said that the damage from being raped was completely healed. There had been a few times that Sign had come to him with male companions instead of her female friend. From time to time there was still a twinge of pain, telling him rather harshly that whatever was wrong had not healed. That area was under the seal and thus Kyubi could do nothing. He was merely a very good actor. Maybe it was because Shizen hadn't thought to check that area, but whatever it was to cause this oversight, Naruto was thankful. There were dire consequences for anyone finding out that information. The contract he had signed in blood that night with Sign made sure of that. Guruko was an exception because Sign didn't know that he could speak, and Naruto thought that with enough persuasion, he could convince the dog not to say anything. He still had 2 weeks with him, and Naruto found that as long as he said things in a certain way, the dog would listen to him. He needed to do damage control with Shizen though. The young medic thought that his illness was just that, an illness that could be fixed with medical ninjutsu. The illness that came to him each night was Naruto's punishment. It was a call, something that Sign used to force Naruto to come to her when she wanted that. As long as Naruto could take the pain, he wouldn't have to go. Sometimes she would corner him after work though, and when she activated one of the 2 seals she placed on him the night of the signing, Naruto was incapable of fighting back. She had taken away his freedom, his ability to get away or say anything, and stripped him of any attempt to get help. The Umbu had pulled every favor she had to make sure Naruto couldn't get to the Hokage before he was forced to sign the contract. The moment he signed it, escape became impossible and going to the Hokage a suicidal plan. Naruto remembered how he thought back then with painful clarity. At the time the Hokage had been the only person to care about him. He didn't even meet Iam or Tuchi until after he received the new apartment from Sign, and that was because the ramen stand was in the nice part of the village near the academy. He walked from the opposite side of the village to get to school every day when he lived in the now fire-damaged apartment. If Naruto had waited to get the old man's help for even a few more days, he would have died. There was no doubt in his mind about that. It was either sign the contract or freeze in some godforsaken alley till death took him. He tried over and over again at every apartment complex in the village to find a place to stay, and each and every time he was denied. For the 10-year-old, it had been heartbreaking and painful. Starvation, cold, fear, pain. All of these were driving points. Still, even as a 10-year-old, he had felt disgusted with the idea. His body in exchange for a home and safety. At several points he considered killing himself rather than going to that woman for help. There was no one in the world that wanted him, no place that welcomed him, and everywhere people hated him. If he had killed himself, no one would care or even hold a funeral for him. Then a thought struck a chord in him. It disturbed him and yet, at the same time, bore a tiny speck of light inside. She did want him. For reasons that horrified and disgusted him, but in the end she did want him. The thought was odd. He was a 10-year-old orphan who jealously watched other children interact with their mothers. Angry when they would say rude things to their mom or just plain didn't listen to them. If he was one of their sons, Naruto would never be rude to her and would always listen to her. That burning desire to have someone hug you at night and care about you was always painfully there, right under the skin. Naruto wasn't naive. He knew that she would never be nice to him or care about him, but wouldn't it be nicer to be in someone's hold rather than alone and frozen in an alley? She actually wanted him, offered him a warm place to live and a home away from drunks that would beat him and dogs that would try to bite him. He wouldn't have to resort to shoving himself as far back as he could in a box to keep the cold away. She wanted to help. These were the thoughts that ran through his mind that day when he had been desperate enough to sign a blood contract with her. Even in this half-dead and desperate state of mind, he had been smart enough to demand some way out. He manipulated her greed and she had fallen for it. The amount was dauntingly large, but it was there, in blood where she couldn't deny it. If he paid her a certain amount of money, the contract would become void, and he would be freed. Naruto was very close to that amount. He only needed a few more months to raise it. For 3 years now he had been working day and night, buying the cheapest foods and clothes, using his supplies with the utmost care. He never ate breakfast, and sometimes skipped lunch or dinner if he thought he could afford to. He begged childishly for higher-ranked missions to get more cash and even resorted to stealing a few times after a particularly vicious night with her. When Swanda first offered the first Hokage's necklace, his mind had immediately jumped to every dark place he knew that he could sell it to for a large amount of money. It would have been enough to free him 10 times over. He'd been incredibly excited about it until Shizen came to talk to him. He'd been disheartened, but still determined to win it in order to free himself. After the battle and getting to know Tsunade and Shizen though, he didn't have the heart to sell it. So the crystal stayed around his neck, the tiny chimes on either side of the crystal so soft that only the wearer could hear them. Sign had been out of the country for the last few months, since the beginning of the Chunin exam, on a special Umbu mission. She had not returned till a month and a half ago. The deal was elaborate. In order to ward off suspicion so that Sign would not get caught, she would call Naruto only at night and never when Naruto was on missions. The call was a torture seal. If Naruto wanted the pain to stop, all he had to do was cooperate, fight, and the pain continued. Sign was always vicious after an abroad mission and wouldn't let up until she'd had her fun for a few weeks. Being on Team 7 for the past year had made Naruto especially rebellious though, and the woman was not happy with him at all. And an unhappy sign made for an extremely unhappy Naruto. He remembered with a shudder what happened when he came back from his wave mission and refused her for an entire month after she had come back from a 4-month mission not even a week later. She'd cornered him after work and rented him to a couple men. It was one of Naruto's worst memories. He hadn't been able to look at any of his team members for weeks. It took several boiling hot showers just to get their feel off his body. The entire time through the rent, Sign had the torture seal as high as it could go, any higher, and it surely would have killed him. This was also the first time since then that he fought back. So, to say the very least, Naruto was terrified. If Shizen found out, and told everyone and Sign found out that she was caught, he would die. He only needed a few more months before he was free, and now everyone and their brother seemed to suddenly care and want to help. It wasn't their fault, he couldn't blame them. It wasn't like they knew they were practically holding a noose around his neck. It was with a distraught ache in his heart that he knew what needed to be done. The only way to get Shizen off his back was to get better, and the only way to do that would be to go to Sign. Naruto shifted his hands underneath the blanket. It was early afternoon and Shizen sat in his kitchen, paperwork on the table, as she waited for him to wake up. He had been pretending to sleep for the last hour, furiously trying to figure out a way to get around the situation without going to Sign and failing miserably. Naruto performed a quick Kage Bunshin to replace him as he quietly grabbed a shirt and his shoes. Without a sound, Naruto slipped through the open window and went out of the apartment. He would need to see Sign this afternoon, but there were several things he needed to take care of before that a worried Shizen would not allow him to. First, he needed to see his team and explain why he had been gone for the second day in 2 weeks. If not for Shizen being there and turning off his alarm, Naruto would never have missed a day of work like this. He needed to get Guruko from Sakura and do some serious persuading. After that, he would have to go to the bar and make up some excuse to not come in tonight or tomorrow night. Shizen would most likely stay with him tonight and would not allow him to go out. She would probably have a heart attack if she knew about his extra job anyway. He would also have to make a deal with Sign, something that would make her stop the seal tonight besides telling her that he would cooperate tomorrow night. Naruto's hand went to his stomach, gently touching the skin there. He lost the fat like she had wanted him to. Maybe he could make it a bargaining chip. She'd been right when she said he had been indulging himself. Any time Iruka offered to buy him dinner, when Kakashi would take his team out, or when they were on missions where the client was paying, or especially while he was with the rich Jiraiya, Naruto took all these opportunities to stuff his face with food as much as he could. It didn't matter what it was: soup, vegetables, meats, desserts, fish, whatever it was, he ate it and even asked for seconds, eating until his stomach was unpleasantly full. He had spent most of his life starving, so he took advantage of it when he was offered free food. Quite often he'd been the blunt of Sasuke's or Sakura's jokes during meals. Back then he thought they'd merely been teasing, but now he noticed the gain in weight over the past few months and hadn't really minded at all. It had felt nice, to be honest. No matter how hard he worked out, he didn't get dizzy. His stomach never ached, and during spars it didn't hurt nearly as bad when Sasuke managed to get a hit to his stomach. He felt stronger than ever, and to him, his punches seemed more powerful. Even when his pants had gotten a little tight, he hadn't minded. She noticed, though. It started with small remarks a little over a month ago, as they would pass each other in the halls. Never anything that could attract the attention of an accidental passerby, just seemingly innocent things, like a hidden code between them. She would say something, and Naruto, as it was coming from her, would know that she meant it in the absolute worst way imaginable. She would comment that his jacket didn't seem so big on him anymore. On her way out of her apartment, she would gently pinch his scarred cheek and say how much fuller they looked today. She always talked as if she was speaking with a nephew, teasingly say how Ichiroku's ramen stand must be the richest in Konoha with how much food he engulfed there. Once, the last time before Guruko started to stay with him, she was even angry enough with him to whisper in his ear about how round his ass cheeks had gotten in the time she was away. She never lost her temper in public. It hadn't quite been the nail to get him to go on a diet, but it had been enough to avoid getting seconds on his missions outside Konoha. When it had really hit home that he had gotten fat was when she cornered him outside the bar with the green-eyed Umbu woman and they had brought him back to Science's apartment. He flinched as he remembered being pinned to the bed, her hands going down his ass and legs, while he struggled against her. She had frowned at him, a look of disgust on her face as she tugged his pants off of him. "Tut tut, you naughty child, you've gained quite a bit of weight, haven't you? It felt good to get those pants off, didn't it? To let that fat ass of yours hang out? These tubby legs of yours must have been screaming for air with how tight your pants looked. You know, there's nothing worse than a fat slut." Her fingers gently pinched the skin on his stomach and then slap it a little. "Soon you'll need to get bigger sized pants and be rolled to missions." She was always cruel, but for some reason those words had been particularly painful. Maybe it was because he cared a lot about what he looked like and she knew it, because for the longest time he blamed the hatred everyone felt for him on his looks. She knew he hated the possession marks on his face, and always made sure to comment on how horrendously ugly they made him look. Every day at the orphanage the children there would talk about the whisker-like scars and call him an ugly freak for it. Many of the foster parents told him what an unbelievably ugly child he was. The marks. His blonde hair. The tan skin. His icy blue eyes. He knew that all these things were uncommon in Konoha and for a time he tried everything to hide them. Hooded jackets. Big hats. Nothing worked. These thoughts of how incredibly ugly he looked were only reinforced by the fact that no one at the academy wanted to talk to him. He was always nice, yet they seemed to hate him on sight. When all the girls started commenting on how handsome and cute Sasuke was and seemed to love and adore him for his looks, it was like confirmation for him. Everyone liked Sasuke because he was good-looking even if he was cold and antisocial. Everyone hated him because he was really ugly, even if he was nice and cheerful. It made logical sense to him. After all, they hadn't even started ninja training, so how could they know who was a good student and who wasn't? Even though he had gained a bit of weight, he hadn't thought that he'd gotten fat, but maybe that was just him being naive? He'd unknowingly added another ugly feature to himself, and the thought bothered him immensely. Why hadn't anyone mentioned that he'd gotten fat? Surely someone noticed? Had Sasuke and Sakura been trying to tell him he'd gotten fat when with their comments about how much he ate? A part of his mind told him that it wasn't his looks that people hated him for but for the Kyuubi. For 10 years he thought it was his looks though. For 2 he thought it was because he was a demon, like Saiyan told him. It was only the past year that he knew the truth of Kyuubi sealed inside of him, and thus 10 years far outweighed the emotional scale than 1. He purposely had no mirrors in the house because he hated looking at himself. What didn't help the matter was that Naruto had no idea what a healthy weight for his size was supposed to be. So for the past few weeks he had been weighing himself in his bathroom and sneaking into the bathroom in the Hokage Tower after missions to take peeks at himself. He would lift up his shirt and touch his stomach in disgust as it moved a little, not knowing that he was actually slightly underweight for his age and height. Plus, with only having the comments of others to go by, left Naruto feeling that the slight movement of his stomach was a very bad thing. Naruto looked at the mirror image with self-loathing, his eyes trained on the lard of fat his mind saw. As Naruto neared the training ground where Team 7 practiced, he felt his arm itch horribly but ignored it. Now that he was close enough he could see that it was only Sakura with Pakken and Guruko off to the side a bit, watching her practice a low-level medical scalpel. "Sakura-chan!" Naruto called out with a wave. She turned and when her eyes fell on him they turned angry. Naruto stiffened at the glare. It reminded him so much of the look he nearly bulked and stepped back. At the last second he managed to rein in the feeling and not react. Sakura crossed her arms and glared angrily at him as Guruko came and sat beside him. "You leave my party early. Fine. You asked me to take over your responsibility for Guruko for the night. Fine. I open up my presents and find out my own teammate didn't even get me a birthday present. That hurt, but okay. You don't pick Guruko up this morning like you promised. Irritating. You don't come to the bridge so we can't take any missions. That pisses me off. I have to pay for Guruko's lunch out of my own pocket because you still haven't picked him up. What the hell is wrong with you? This is the second time in 2 weeks that you've missed missions," Sakura yelled out, anger leaking in every word. Naruto had forgotten about the present. He didn't have the heart yesterday to give it to her after what Sasuke did. It had lost its specialness. He'd left it in the pocket of his jacket in the apartment. A part of him whispered that it didn't really matter, that she wouldn't wear it anyways, because it came from him, her worthless teammate. He tried hard to push such thoughts as far down as he could, but more often than not, they still managed to seep in. Naruto opened his mouth to explain, but Sakura cut him off. "Never mind, I know exactly what's wrong with you. You're selfish and arrogant, and always try to be the center of attention. When you told me the other day you wanted to change for the better, I believed you, but you're not even trying. You're nothing like Sasuke and will never be as good as Sasuke. Sasuke gave me a present that took a lot of time and effort to think of. He showed that he cared about his teammate. I would have been happy with a simple card. But no, you didn't even do that. It really hurt, you know? You were only there for half an hour before you left, and gave me the job of watching Guruko at my own birthday party. I bet you didn't even have a sick friend. God, now that I think about it, that's one of the most common ditch excuses ever used. Sasuke stayed for the whole party and even offered to watch Guruko and pack in for me because it was my birthday. Sasuke arrived on time but went to train by himself after we realized you weren't coming." Each jibe felt a little worse than the last. Somehow, more so than anyone else he knew, Sasuke and Sakura knew just the right words that cut the deepest. He had already felt incredibly guilty about the present, already felt bad about having to leave Guruko with Sakura. He had been doubting himself horribly ever since his fight with Sasuke on the roof and been wondering if his teammates thought him as worthless as he felt. It was as if Sakura peered into his mind and picked the best insults Naruto himself could think of before laying them out before him in her own voice. "You can never even be compared to Sasuke. You're worthless. You're a monster, Naruto. Nothing you can ever do can change who you are. I don't want anything to do with you. I don't even want you as a teammate. You don't care about your team, how could you? You're a monster." Naruto swallowed, but his throat felt dry and it caused a dry lump to stay in his throat. How did he somehow always end up screwing everything up? He hadn't planned on collapsing in the streets, or Anko bringing him home, or Ibiki getting Shizen, or Shizen turning his alarm off and keeping him in bed. He hadn't planned on sleeping till 12 because Shizen put medicine inside the teacup she'd given him. He'd planned on picking Sakura up a present that Sasuke hadn't already gotten her on his way to her house in the morning, planned on apologizing and saying he forgot to give it to her last night, planned on arriving on time and doing his job. Planned on being there for his teammates. For him, though, plans never seemed to go the way he wanted. It hurt so bad and the itch in his arm had intensified to an almost unbearable ache. Sakura accused him of not being there for his teammates, for not caring about them. For him, that was the worst insult anyone could ever give him, more so than even monster. His very purpose for living, the reason he got up each day, was to do just that. That was his role in life, to be there for his team and to protect them. More so than anything else in the world, he wanted his team to care as much about him as he did them. But as long as he could stay by their side and protect them, then knowing that they'll never care that much about him was something he could handle. As long as they were safe and happy, he was content. For her to say that to him was like a physical stab wound. Sakura stood in front of him, her tirade over, and waited for him to reply. When Naruto just stood there and refused to say anything, Sakura began to tap her foot in irritation. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Sakura finally snapped after a few minutes. Guruko growled at her threateningly, which Sakura just glared back at even as the dog moved between her and her teammate. She had learned through the night that Guruko had for some reason or another become rather attached to Naruto and got angry whenever the blonde was insulted in front of him. Sakura had thought it was cute last night, but at the moment it just annoyed her. Naruto mumbled something, causing Sakura to raise her gaze from the dog to Naruto. For some odd reason, Naruto wasn't wearing his forehead protector, and with his head bent down slightly, his two long bangs covered his eyes completely. "What? I didn't hear you," Sakura asked huffily. "Why are you even angry?" Naruto asked softly. Sakura felt fury rush through her. He had the gall to She just finished explaining why she was angry. She opened her mouth to reply, but Naruto stopped her. Naruto's head moved up and Sakura stared in shock. Naruto's blue eyes were shining with hurt that she had never witnessed before, tears threatening to fall at any moment. Naruto bit his lip, looking at the ground for a moment as if hesitant to continue, before he turned to her again. Why are you even mad? Any other time you would be more than happy that I'm not around, Naruto whispered unsteadily. Then, quietly, he turned around and walked away. Guruko growled at her, absolute hate shining in his eyes as he too turned and trotted after Naruto. Off to the side, Pakken stared after the blonde, a great deal of concern and worry in his eyes as Sakura continued to look at the spot Naruto stood 2 seconds ago in shock. Well, that was unexpected, Pakken muttered. Far away just outside the city section of Konoha, Naruto sat down and leaned against a brick wall, trying to recollect himself and inwardly cursing at his own emotional slip-up. Guruko nudged the boy's foot with his nose before sitting next to him. Are you alright? Fine, Naruto answered unconvincingly. You want to talk about it? No. Alright. I'll be here if you do. Thank you. With Guruko by his side, Naruto went to the bar and got the 2 days off, though grudgingly done. Whether the man admitted it or not, Naruto was one of his best and reliable workers. When it came to talking to Sign, Naruto made Guruko stay outside the apartment building before going to talk to her. He didn't want to take any chances. Sign's apartment, as most Umbu have a tendency to do, held several protection seals on the walls. The rooms were soundproof and, due to Sign's teammate being an Inuzuka and thus being well aware of what smell could give away, also smell-proof. Naruto, through a miracle of some kind or another, got Guruko to not say anything to Shizen for the time being. Naruto had a clone henge into Sakura and dropped Guruko off before quietly getting rid of the clone in the room and slipping under the covers without the jounin being the wiser. Naruto was correct in assuming that Shizen would stay for the night. When the blonde got up and proved to the women he was alright, she hemmed at him and checked his chakra again to make sure it was behaving. Then she disappeared for a half an hour and came back with a grocery bag of food which she then proceeded to cook. Naruto sat at the table with his arms folded and head atop them. His eyes watched the grease drip from the sausages with disgust as she fried them in one of his old pans, but Naruto was not someone who insulted another person's kindness by being rude. Couldn't she have picked something lighter though? Just looking at it was making his stomach queasy. Besides, could he really afford to eat something that looked so fattening? Shizen then cut them up and placed them on top of the noodles she'd boiled a few minutes beforehand, adding some kind of red sauce on top of it all. The young medic then made 2 plates and set one in front of him and herself. It smells delicious, doesn't it? Shizen asked as she dug her fork into it. Naruto stared at the concoction as a piece of the greasy meat slid from the top of the mound to the side. What is it? Naruto asked as he picked up a fork and poked the red-covered noodles. Shizen stared at him for a long moment, a piece of noodle halfway to her mouth, eyes shining with disbelief. You've never had spaghetti before? Shizen asked after finishing the bite. When Naruto shook his head to indicate he had not, her eyes began to twinkle with mischief. Then go ahead and try it. It's very good, and if you don't want to eat the meat, that's fine. I know you're still recovering from being sick. Shizen relented. She watched him diligently, wanting to see his expression when the boy first tried it. Naruto hesitantly twirled the noodles onto his fork and put them in his mouth. The taste was good, he had to admit. And it was a lot less on the heavy side than he'd first thought, so his stomach didn't protest. He smiled at Shizen as he swallowed and nodded. It's very good, you're a really good cook, Naruto told her. Shizen blushed, which caused Naruto to outright laugh. It's about time you ate something other than rice and ramen, Guruko commented from his spot on the floor. Not much of an improvement though, seeing as it's still noodles. Shizen tilted her head toward the dog and smiled. I thought I'd start him off with something he was semi-familiar with before trying other things on him, Shizen admitted. Naruto froze. What do you mean? Naruto asked carefully. Shizen smiled at him reassuringly, seriousness suddenly taking over. You didn't think I'd just leave you alone after this, did you? You obviously need medical care. Your cabinets are empty of food. You look like you belong more in a refugee camp than in the ranks of shinobi. Seriously, Naruto, I know you're determined to take care of yourself, but when you're sick, you're supposed to seek help," Shizen said sternly. Naruto shook his head at her. "I don't have the money to pay for medical care and I've got enough food to get by to it's fine. Not to mention, being sick has never gotten in the way of any of my shinobi duties. If you hadn't drugged me this morning I would have gone to work like any other day," Naruto shot back. Shizen frowned at him, sadness clear on her features. "Lady Tsunade and I are medics, Naruto, and we both care deeply about you. If you needed medical help, you should have come to us immediately. I don't care if you have the money to pay for it or not. Neither of us would have charged you anyways. You should have gone to Kakashi a long time ago for help with this. Enough food to get by. Naruto, you're nothing but skin and bones for God's sake. Rice and ramen is not enough to live on, and it surprises me to no end that you haven't collapsed while on missions. You can't keep forcing yourself to go to work, Naruto. You need to stay home and get better," Shizen told Naruto. Naruto shook his head at her. "My fever is gone and I'm all better. You don't need to stay here and babysit me like some kid. I've made it this far without help and I've been through worse times, so don't worry about me," Naruto said as he slowly put another bite of spaghetti into his mouth. He learned a long time ago that the slower you eat the sooner you feel full. Shizen put her cup down with a loud thud, her eyes blazing angrily. "You are only better because I was here to temporarily heal you. Whatever it is that's making you sick will come back. I'm not gonna let you live by yourself with this, Naruto. I know you were alone as a child, but that's not true anymore. Don't shut out your friends when all they want is to help you," Shizen said, her voice rising to a yell towards the end. Naruto flinched. God, he wished she would stop. "She's right, Naruto. I think you should listen to her. You're sick for many nights during the week and I can tell you're in a lot of pain from it," Guruko added hesitantly. Naruto glared slightly at the dog, irritated with the both of them. He had to think of a way around this fast. What if, oh God, the coming weeks were going to be horrible? What if you set up appointments? I'll come every other day to these appointments, and you'll check me out. If the sickness comes back then I'll do what you want, but if it doesn't then you'll stop worrying. Okay? Naruto asked Shizen and Guruko. Shizen looked at Naruto wearily, suspicious of the sudden cooperation from the usually stubborn genin. "There is still the problem with your heart," Shizen said slowly, watching Naruto for a reaction. "Tsunade needs to examine your heart so that we can get a better idea of how to fix the damage." Naruto flinched horribly at that, hands dropping from the table to his lap. He certainly didn't want to go into another operation. The thought caused a shudder to go down his spine. "Is that really necessary? Can't I just live with the damage?" Naruto asked. Guruko's cold nose touched Naruto's hand, unsure why the preteen seemed so frightened all of a sudden. "What's this about heart damage?" the dog asked as he stared up at Naruto's slightly shaking form. Shizen's eyes softened. Naruto's had heart damage since he was very young. Something went very wrong in his last operation, and the sum of the damage was never fixed. Most likely Naruto will have to have another operation, and I'd like to have it done before Naruto goes on another big mission with his team, Shizen explained to the dog. She then turned to Naruto. "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, but to be completely honest, I don't see how your heart hasn't become a problem by now. In fact, it makes me think that it has been causing you problems. But it's been damaged for so long you don't know what's normal. Not to mention it greatly affects how well you can control your chakra. An operation soon would be the best for you." Naruto stared down at his food blankly, unsure how to take the news. I don't want, can I just? Naruto mumbled out, his hands clenching his pants till the knuckles showed white. Shizen stood from her seat, and when she reached Naruto, the young medic wrapped her arms around the small genin. Naruto shook, shaking his head from side to side, as if denying it would make the problem go away. After several long minutes, Naruto stilled in the woman's arms and sagged against her frame. "It won't be anyone else, right? Just you and Tsunade?" Naruto asked quietly. Shizen squeezed Naruto's shoulders tightly. I swear to God that no one else would so much as touch you," Shizen promised. Naruto bit his lip hard, eyes trained on the ground, avoiding Guruko's imploring stare. I really don't have the money to pay medical bills for something like that," Naruto protested weakly. Shizen smiled. "Tsunade and I will pay for it, and I don't want to hear about any attempts at paying us back," Shizen said sternly. Silently and hesitantly Naruto nodded his head. "Can Iruka stay with me until you take me in?" Naruto asked, fingers brushing through Guruko's fur. Guruko leaned into the touch, aware that whatever Naruto was so terrified of, only Shizen knew. The sadness in the woman's eyes spoke volumes as she looked down at the dog's human friend. "I promise, Iruka can stay with you till you go in," Shizen said reassuringly. Naruto nodded his head again. "All right," Naruto finally answered. Shizen squeezed his shoulders tightly once more, trying to give him some of her courage. She knew how difficult this would be for him. The last operation a horrific nightmare that she was sure caused the boy to wake up screaming in the night. "Good. Now for food. I'm going to be here at 5 every day to cook dinner for you. When I come I'll check up on you physically," Shizen chirped. So caught off guard was the boy he actually fell out of his chair. "What?" Naruto asked horrified. Shizen stayed all last night, periodically checking Naruto's temperature every half an hour. Naruto tried to get her to leave early, saying that he was completely fine, but she would have not any of it. Naruto didn't get sick that night because Saiyan hadn't called him, just as they'd agreed. That meant tonight Naruto would have to willingly go to her place. He and Shizen had talked for quite a while, deciding when he should go see Tsunade with her. They'd decided that they would wait a week from then until Shizen was sure that the illness wasn't going to come back. They would do it next Monday and then decide from there whether he needed an operation or if something else could be done to fix the problem. Piles of problems seemed to have fallen like a set of dominoes, each new one setting off another, and each just as bad as the last. All the stress was getting to him. Another problem was Shizen. The women seemed determined to make him gain weight. She hadn't been satisfied until he'd eaten at least half the plate, and she planned on doing it every single night. He really didn't understand why she felt compelled to make him eat so much food, but he was not happy about it. He'd worked hard to shed the 10 or so pounds he had gained from pig outs, and Saiyan would be really angry with him if she saw him gaining them again. It made him a bit annoyed that after all of Sasuke and Sakura's teasing and insults about him eating so much that they hadn't even noticed that he'd stopped the last month or so ago. It didn't bother him too much though, because neither of them ever said anything towards him about anything unless it was negative, so Naruto took their silence as a good thing. He'd have to find a way to eat the food for Shizen and not gain weight for Saiyan. His head was beginning to hurt as he attempted to take control of the situation. Training among the members of Team 7 was uncomfortable and tense. Naruto didn't want to talk with Sasuke or Sakura at the moment due to Sasuke's betrayal and the argument he'd had with Sakura. Sasuke, who, feeling slightly guilty but mostly contented with the hurt he'd caused Naruto, stayed in his own little area practicing fire jutsu. He was still incredibly angry with Naruto for their unfinished fight on the rooftops of the hospital and felt that Naruto deserved the treatment he was getting from him. Sakura, still shocked by what Naruto said to her yesterday, meekly took the scroll of medical information she'd been given to read and sat at the other end of the training ground. The suffocating silence between them was painful. While Naruto didn't want to talk to them, another part of him was dying to break down and tell them how horrible everything had been for him the last few weeks. They were the closest thing he had to what someone would call siblings, and he desperately needed them at the moment. The problem was that they were part of the problem. His life this past few weeks wouldn't have been nearly as bad without them adding on to it. How could he tell them that he needed a heart operation? How could he say that he was terrified by it? How could he tell them that he had been attacked by someone and been hoping that they would notice his absence from missions and come find him? How could he explain to them his financial problems and being sick and how hard it had been just to go to work? How could he tell them anything when he wasn't sure if they even gave a damn about him? He was the only one in the Rookie 12 that they treated so callously. He was the only one that they so casually insulted and ridiculed on a daily basis. He was the only one that they managed to forget to say happy birthday to. He was the only one that got hit for the smallest mistake. They treated their own teammate as if he was an enemy that needed to be constantly put down so that he didn't become a threat. The question was what threat they thought he could pose. He would always consider them to be the most important people in his life, but now and since the beginning, he could never trust them with his problems. There was a thick glass wall between him and them. It was acceptable to tell them happy things and to smile and laugh with them, but anything deeper or darker had to be held inside and ignored. And that was okay with him, because he was so used to doing it with everything in his life anyways. All he needed was one thing to make it through the day, and it was definitely not a person. He desperately needed that stress reliever before he had to go see Sign. Naruto wouldn't look at him. As they walked home from training, Guruko noticed that Naruto was being extremely quiet. His eyes were focused solely on the ground directly in front of him the whole way. It had annoyed the dog that they had gotten to the training field only to have the three supposed teammates do everything in their power to ignore each other. Guruko tried to get Naruto to talk to his teammates, but the preteen adamantly refused to speak with them. Not that the dog really blamed him after what the two of them had said and done to the blonde. When they walked into the apartment, Naruto went about normally, pouring Guruko some more food and watering his plants. "Guruko, I'm going to go take a shower, alright?" Naruto said softly as he moved to the bathroom. "Fine, just don't take too long, Shizen will be here in an hour." The dog called stretched as he padded over to his water bowl, listening as the shower turned on in the background. Guruko couldn't help but snicker. For a guy, Naruto always took a really long time in the shower. The alarm went off in Naruto's room, the annoying buzz ringing through the small apartment. Naruto must have forgotten to turn it off before they left this morning, and the stupid thing had probably been going off every 10 minutes. Guruko glowered in hatred at it as he slunk into the small bedroom. He knocked the abomination off of the dresser and let it fall to the ground with a thunk, smiling in satisfaction. The stupid thing was still ringing though. Guruko hit it several times, trying to push the tiny little buttons to shut it up. At one point he even lightly chewed on the block of noise, mindful that Naruto would be angry if he broke another alarm clock. Still, the thing continued to ring incessantly. Guruko gave up and went to the bathroom door to get Naruto so that he could stop it. "Naruto!" Guruko called, paw scratching the door. No one answered. "Naruto, your alarm is driving me insane!" Still no answer. Irritating blonde. Guruko muttered as he glared at the door in front of him and smirked. The front door was always locked, so Guruko could not open it, but the bathroom door was a completely different story. Guruko pulled off his blue vest-like jacket, teeth careful not to poke holes in the material, and expertly swung it upwards, pulling on the cloth when it began to descend and catching it on the knob. "Let's see if Pakken could do that," Guruko thought triumphantly. Guruko twisted his head and turned the knob, quickly pushing his body against the wooden rectangle to open it wide. So what if he embarrassed Naruto a little, if it meant getting the evil alarm to shut off? Guruko let the vest-like jacket flutter to the ground as he walked through the doorway and stopped dead in his tracks. His entire body was frozen as a pair of frightened blues stared back at him in shock. Naruto wasn't in the shower. In fact, he was still fully dressed, his jacket the only article missing, laying on top of the toilet seat. The blonde had his back against the tub with his legs sprawled out in front of him. That wasn't what Guruko was staring at though. Naruto's face was struck with pure horror as Guruko caught him in the act. From his elbow down 6 long inches sat a row of deep bloody cuts, some could be considered gashes, on his right arm. Naruto's left hand held a sharp, blood-covered razor frozen in the midst of cutting another jagged line into his right arm. They both just stared at each other before one of them began to move, ready to stop the other by any means necessary. That's it for part 4. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.